So now that we have our skin shaded and highlit, I think before I completely run away with this, I think I am going to actually add one more layer of skin shading. I didn't mean to, I wasn't going to, but some of the darker areas, or areas that I think should be darker, are driving me a little crazy. So really quickly, I'm going to grab my skin shading 2-layer, and we'll duplicate it off, and I'll grab everything inside of it and nuke it, and let's hit Control D, and I'll zoom in. Some of the areas I'm talking about are like the armpit, which I think should be a lot darker than it is. So we'll just trace out a section here and pull that around to the back, and we'll darken this up. And I'll do this as quick as I can so I don't get, well, I guess you can't really get held up. And this is just how the process goes. That's better. This little corner here underneath the love handle, I think, could be darkened up a bit. So this is just for, like, the most extreme darkening areas. So it's something to be used very subtly, kind of push to the background. You could probably do well to grab the fingers back here and darken those up a bit. Maybe the back of the knee slightly, and then what's going on up here underneath where the loincloth comes in, and the ankle on this side of the leg. Maybe a little bit here on the outside of the knee, but notice I'm trying not to use it very much. It's just kind of an accent approach. I can darken up the belly button a little more. Nothing there. This armpit can be darker. And we can kind of accentuate that line that we've created there. And we can darken up the elbow a bit, which should help push the arm back a little bit visually. And the underside of the hand here can, of course, be very dark. And can really darken up the ends of the fingers. Underneath the chin, we can just kind of trace underneath. And let's clean that little spill there. You can probably follow this around to the back of the head. And just grab this section here at the back of the head, color that in as well. Maybe just a little bit here underneath the nose and in the corner of the nose. And get the corner of the eyes a little bit, almost now to the point of using eyeshadow or eyeliner, which I'm okay with. It's really bringing those eyes out quite a bit. And I think that's everything. So, yeah, I just was really bothered by that. I wanted to feel a little more depth than what I was feeling, so there's a quick addition of one more layer of shading. Okay, so with that done, yeah, I like that a lot better. Let's take a look at the leather pieces. And I'll name this layer before we get too far away. That'll be Skin Shading 3. I'm going to take all of my skin effectors, and we're going to, there's currently 5, 2 highlights, 3 shadings, and we're going to put those into their own folder, which I will call Skin Shading. Which, it's just a general term meaning highlights and any shading layers. As long as I know that going in, everything's fine. And, of course, naturally with this way, you can turn that on and off, which is a great way to, let you see how far you've come. Here's where we started, and now here's where we are. So now you can really see that depth appear, almost out of nowhere. Okay, so with that, let's create a new layer, and we're going to call this, we had Dark Leather, DK Leather Shading 1. And I'm going to grab the dark leather layer mask, hold down Alt, and drag that up here onto the dark leather shading 1 layer, and boom, now we have restricted where that shading can be placed. It can now only be placed on these dark pieces of leather. Now, everything else we would need to set up by hand. So, I guess we can still do that. Yeah, let's just take its multiply, or sorry, let's take its blend mode and set it over to multiply, and then we know that we are using an opacity of 40, so oh, look, I'm setting the wrong thing. Don't ever do that. Put that back on normal. Make sure you have the right layer selected before you start arbitrarily changing settings. That can be very useful advice for the future. Alright, boom, there we go. So 40%, the exact same setup we had with our other layers. In fact, what I could have done is duplicated one of our original shading layers, deleted all of its pixel data, and replaced its layer mask. But we didn't, so there you go. Alright, so I'm going to start over here with the bracer on the left arm. And this should all go very simply, because there's really not a whole lot of differentiation in contour here. So I'm just going to start off, we'll paint around here. I'm going to make the parts with the studs look like they're indented a little bit, and I'll do that by doing this sort of curvature, this all the way down, like so. And you can already kind of see where that kind of makes those buttons look like they push in just a little bit. Almost like maybe that's how you buckle the thing on. So that was pretty easy. We could maybe give a little bit of shading just for depth purposes right underneath here. Like maybe we're picking up just a little bit of a shadow from the body and from the belly. Just kind of S-curves along, and then we'll flow that right down into the forearm. I also don't mind the idea of putting a little bit of shadow, not even that much. Let's zoom in and make it a little easy. Just a tad right along the cuff, like it starts to kind of turn in at the last second. And then we can dive in here and clean up some of these little gaps. Make sure this is all nice and neat. We'll arc this in just a little bit. And see, you notice we have this darkening line from our skin. If you break these up a little bit and make sure that one line doesn't exactly flow into the next, you start to give the hint of differing levels of elevation. So just tiny little bits of food for thought. Just enough to keep you from starving. Alright, so I think that'll work there. Let's just jump over to the belt because I just happened to see it. Now this will probably be, it'll end up getting very dark. We could probably actually color in this whole thing because this is all very much in the shadow of the belly. We might leave just a little bit of it exposed here at the outermost edge, if for no other reason than just to let people know that that's not a flat color. There is some depth there. So sometimes you break away from the bounds of what's really there just to make it look right. So now it is catching a little bit of light. And same thing over here. We could darken the whole thing in, and probably should, but we'll leave a little bit there just to suggest that this is shading, and it's not that the thing is a flat brown color. Sometimes what should be there and what actually looks right are two entirely different things. Okay, so over here we'll do the same thing where we'll create... Oh, I must have hit a button. Don't hit a button. We'll create these little rounded areas to make that little silver stud look like it's pushed in a little bit. And then we'll put a little shading over here. We'll run right across the bottom, creating a little bit of an indentation for the cuff. And that's really all we need there. That's fine. Okay, so the arm over here. Well, this is going to be a little different. We can really give this a lot of darkening on this one end. And I think that's it. That's quick and easy. And I'm going to back out over here so I can see just a little bit better. Now, a lot of this is going to be pretty dark. What I'm going to do is darken up here underneath the wrist, and then bring this all the way back around. So really the only thing that's generally exposed to 100% light is just going to be this part of the forearm. Everything else is going to be pretty much darkened up. That should really make it look like the forearm's got a little bit of a bulge to it and help kind of show off the curvature of the forearm. I love how those layer masks just allow us to just scribble like mad and not have to worry about staying within the lines. And we can probably just real carefully make an edge along the outside there. And we'll do the same thing with a cuff. We'll just create a little darkening effect there. There we go. Cool. And that takes us down to the shoes. The shoes are probably the most complex thing we have on this particular part. So I'm just going to create some basic shading for this fur area just to make it look like it is sitting on top of the shoe. And then we'll curl around here from the heel because a lot of this is facing away from the light. That's pretty easy. Just scribble that in, try to keep things nice and neat while we do it though. Okay, and darken in here. Make sure it's nice and irregular looking. Okay, now all of this should be in shadow. We can probably grab this entire side of the shoe. Just darken that up. And just a little bit, like maybe it's catching some shadow from the opposite leg. I do see it looks like we kind of have a gap in the coloring right there, and I see another one over here in all of this. Now, I'm going to be really careful about this one. Let me jump in, I'll make my brush small, and I'll just fill this one in by hand. Now, I'm being really nitpicky about these. You know, in a lot of cases, you might not even really need to worry about them, because who's going to see them anyway? But just because it's me, and I'm nitpicky. So, there you go. Now, let's move this over here to this opposite leg, and we'll do the same thing. We're bleeding a little bit outside the lines, but I'd rather have lines than white gaps. Okay, cool. Step out of here, go back to our leather shading, and the underside of the shoe. I must have really shrunk my brush down. Let's make our brush nice and fat again. There we go. Oh, look, I'm using the pencil. Don't use the pencil. Pencil's bad. There we go. Okay. And let's get a nice big fat brush. Speed this process up a lot. There we go. And we'll jump over here and I'll, a little overboard. Fix that little gap and that little gap there, and then jump right back up here and keep on shading. Okay, and I think that's going to work there. So let's pull back and see what we have. Already a lot of depth added, and if you need to just double check that, just turn your layer on and off. You can really see that start to come to life. Let's go ahead and copy this just while we're here. We're on a roll now, so we'll create another leather shading layer. We'll just name it 2 instead of 1 copy. And we'll just go right back to what we were doing. We'll just start with this bracer once again. So we can get a little bit closer. There we go. How big is my brush? Oh, yeah, there we go. We got to delete everything. So hit Control-A, delete. And now we can... Ooh, bring the brush size way down, please. And we can darken this up. Again, I'm just making those buttons look a little bit indented. Okay, and maybe just a little bit right in here, almost imperceptible. Just build that out. And this kind of shading always reminds me of the old LucasArts games like Full Throttle. I love that game. Alright, so we'll shade up the corner of the belt. And so now we're creating that banding to really give the impression that that belt has some shading, which I think is going to be important. We don't want it to look like it's, you know, just some flat brown. Alright, now we can darken this up because it's getting right up there toward the armpit. This we can pull like so. There we go. Looking good. Maybe accentuate that indentation just a little bit more. And this is very simple bit of shading. And this will probably be a little more complex, but not too bad. We're going to really kind of darken this whole thing up. Okay, and I think that works for that. Let's fly down here to the shoe. And Start getting that heel nice and dark. Let me get the underside of the toe. Alright, move over to the other shoe. I'll get the front part of the shoe really quick and easy like. And then just pull out the outside of the foot. I think that's everything. Okay, now, just for the fun of it, I'm going to do just what I did with the skin. We'll add one more subtle layer of shading that we're not going to use very much. We'll use it very sparingly, so let's dupe this off one more time. Change its name to now Shading 3. Grab all the pixels in it and delete those like we did before, and now we're just going to find some of the darkest areas to add this. So let's say right up here at the top of the bracer, we'll add a little bit. Maybe just a little bit also down here at the corner. Of course, that's going to be naturally pretty dark, so we'll fill that in. A bit right here at the very edge. Darken that up. Okay, there we go. I'm not going to worry about the inside there. We'll go ahead and get the top of the belt and up here. And we can darken this up a lot. And really push back that part of the belt and make it look like it turns out as it's really forced down by the weight of that gut. And we can come around here to the heel. So get the back of the heel really well. Maybe a little bit here at the arch of the foot. Drive that back a little further, and we can get the outermost part of the ankle and then the outside section of the toes here, as well as maybe the underside of the shoe very subtly. And I think that's all we really need to do. So there's all of our leather shading. So now let's jump right into some highlights for the leather. So let's grab one of our layers, we'll duplicate it, and we'll change the name from shading to, make sure it's, okay, yeah, leather, I must be hitting an A key somewhere. Highlight 1, there we go, and we're just going to set its blend mode from multiply over to screen, just like we did before, and I'm going to leave its opacity at 40% right now, because I want the leather to be a little shinier than the skin, so it's really going to bring these highlights out. My other option would be, of course, to just layer some more stacks of these highlight layers on top of one another, but we'll see how this goes first. Okay, create a shape there, and then create sort of a band here. Make sure it doesn't completely line up with what's going on the bicep. And I don't really want to make that line up, hit the shadow down there at the bottom of that band, so we'll carefully cut it off right there. Would that go that way? I'm trying to remember. Or would it arc over that? I think it would actually arc over it. But I could be wrong. Sometimes I get confused trying to follow that. That seems to be working either way. Probably no need to highlight anything on the belt. And we could just take some patches on the shoes, very much like what we were doing with the skin earlier. I think that's everything. So let's back out and just see how that looks. Okay, I think I'm actually okay with that. I think we can add one more layer of that that's very subtle, or I guess not subtle as much as used sparingly. And we'll have all of the shading that I want for the leather. So maybe just like one little bit here, one little stripe in here. A little stripe right in through there. Just kind of build one up that snakes down through here. And then right there. Single stroke. Okay, so now what I want to do, and this is just me, really. I'm going to select these layers. I'm going to start pulling back on their opacity a little bit, see if it would look better to tone them down just a tad. And it takes a second to actually get feedback there. So if I take the first layer and I pull that back down to, say, about 25 instead of 40, but I could leave that next layer there, and it really starts to add, a differing level of shine. So there's not like such a linear fall off in the specularity. And I think that with that, we've got the leather pretty much taken care of. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. Let's step back from what we've got, and let's take all of our leather modifiers, and let's drop them into a group, and we'll call this leather shading. And just as a quick, reminder, we can turn these off, and we can see where we were without any depth, without any shading whatsoever, and then turn them back on, and you really see that depth start to, jump out at you. So that's going to wrap things up for this video. In the next video, we'll probably tackle what's going on with the loincloth, do a little bit of work on the eyes, and then I think maybe we'll add in the little stick that he should be holding. And thanks a lot.